Welcome to another video by the YouTube channel of the official All Black fan page. So I'm Max, and there was quite a bit of people and a story on the Instagram page asking us we should do a video on the Team of the Decade World Rugby released a few days ago. I don't have a script for this one, so bear with me, there might be a few jump cuts, but that's just going to be how it is. So there was quite a bit of mixed reception, to say the least, about the Team of the Decade. There were the likes of Aaron Smith, Julian Savia, that a few people were a bit angry about because they didn't actually make the team. So I'm just going to give my thoughts on the Team of the Decade itself, and I'm going to tell you guys kind of what my opinions are on the team and what selection changes I would make. I'll probably make a few suggestions here and there, and I might even end up like naming a bench or something, who knows. I always seem to name a bench when I'm making selections on my head. So for the loose head prop jersey, it's Tendai Mtawarira from South Africa. He's known as the Beast, obviously, because, you know, the guy was an incredibly strong player until he retired at the end of last year during the World Cup. The Beast played over 100 tests after making his debut in 2008. And he was incredibly fearsome. He was a massive impact for the 2011 and 2019 World Cups, and also played in the 2015's effort. He was probably one of South Africa's most reliable players, and he was a huge standout, especially for a prop. I mean, there were the likes of Garcia from Australia, or Santiago, Garcia, Botta from Argentina, who were staples in their team's fearsome scrums over those last 10 years, but at the end of the day, you've got to admit that the Beast is the best loose-head prop from the year 2010 to 2019, so, you know, I'm going to have to agree, rather, with World Rugby's decision on that one, because you don't really get much better than that guy, do you? Hooker is, believe it or not, Bismarck du Plessis. I didn't really think that was going to be the pick for Hooker. I was thinking more of the likes of, you know, Jamie George, Ken Owens, Rory Best, Guilhem Guirado, like those massive guys from up north. I mean, I'd love to see Kevin Mialamu in there, but Bismarck du Plessis probably did have a better 2010s decade than Mialamu, because, you know, Mialamu was kind of running on his last legs by the time it was the 2015 World Cup, and Dane Coles had obviously supplanted him as the regular starter. But I'm actually going to have to say that Guilhem Guirado from France was the best hooker from 2010 to 2019. The guy was always the standout, and he captained France, I think, 33 times, and he was always that man getting his line-out targets correct, and indeed that's the most important thing about being a hooker, and also he probably had better discipline than du Plessis. Now we're moving on to the number 3 jersey, which is Owen Franks. Dude, Owen was a very, very talented scrummager, we all know that, but off the ball, the guy was just MIA the whole time. I know that he had an Achilles injury, which, you know, you've got to feel sorry for Owen on that one, because it did really appear to cripple him, especially in 2017 when he was on the Lions tour. But Owen Franks was just one of those old-fashioned kind of props, and, you know, that style of play's kind of gone out the window. The likes of W.P. Nell, even Franz Malherbe, Taniela Tupou, Sekope Kepu, props like that are much more mobile athletes with bigger frames than Franks, but they're also doing a lot more work because they're leaner and they've lost a bit of that muscle. We all know that Owen was a big gym man, and he was probably like the most dedicated athlete that the All Blacks have ever had, but at the end of the day, there were far better players than Owen in the number 3 jersey, I think, throughout the 2010s. And a man that kind of epitomises what I was talking about before is Adam Jones from Wales. Jones was a hard worker just like Owen, but he also, you know, did his best off the ball. He'd be making his tackles, he'd be hitting those rucks, making the clear outs. Every now and again, rather, he'd make like a turnover or something, and I believe he actually scored a try for Wales at some stage. Owen Franks played 108 tests from 2009 to 2019, and he never scored a try. I know it's not a props job, but I kind of hold that against the guy, eh? Regardless, he is a talented player. I'm just picking Adam Jones over Owen Franks. The locking combo, not really a surprise. It's Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock. There's no question for me that Sammy deserves to be in there. I think he's possibly the best lock of all time, but Brodie Retallick, on the other hand, debuts 2 years after Sam, and once it hit 2017, like, that was possibly when he was at his best, but after that, the guy was kind of in and out of the team, and the likes of Eben Etzebeth, Mara Watoje, even though he was only around for 4 years of the last decade, Alun Wyn-Jones, I feel those guys were all outperforming Brodie Retallick for quite a bit of a stretch, especially Eben Etzebeth and Alun Wyn-Jones, rather. Those guys played throughout the decade, especially Jones, and I think Jones was, a huge, massive influence on Warren Gatland's Wales side, and although Jones is definitely past it at this stage, Jones was so influential. I can't even find words to kind of describe the impact that Jones has had on Welsh rugby. He debuted all the way back in 2006, and somehow he's still going to this day, and he's the most capped player of all time, and I just can't think of anybody else besides Alun Wyn-Jones to kind of take that number 4 jersey away from Brodie Retallick. Number 6 is David Pocock. Pocock was a beast at the breakdown, but the discipline side of his game, I don't think was too good. The guy had a magnificent career, no doubt, but I feel in this aspect, Thierry Dusautoir, who is the French captain for 2011 and 2015, was far better. Dusautoir was just a tackling machine. He held his discipline. He even scored tries. Dusautoir was just so dedicated to his work off the field, and he was so dedicated to the cause of the team. And Pocock, on the other hand, was in and out of the Wallabies side because he was injured, and I think that Dusautoir probably had so much more impact on his national team than Pocock ever could have. So for number 6, I'm going to name Thierry Dusautoir. Jerome Kaino would be a close second on that one, because who doesn't think Jerome Kaino is a fantastic player? Moving on to number 7, there's no question it was always going to be Richie McCaw. Everyone knows he was player of the decade, so I'm not going to argue with that one. He is the greatest forward to ever play the game, and I 100% agree with Richie McCaw in the team of the decade. But number 8, I don't agree with at all. Like, Sergio Preez had all those Dusautoir kind of type elements to his work off the field, but on the field, I feel as if Preez kind of tried to do all the work on his own to make up for the rest of the side's lack of ability in comparison to his own. And I feel that Preez's ego possibly even held Italy back a wee bit, because the team even appears to be relying on Preez to an extent, in my opinion. Preez was a fantastic player for sure, but when you contrast that to the likes of CJ Stander, Toby Faletau and Kieran Reid, like, those guys are just complete total foot soldiers who will do their best for the coach, and they're always going to put the team first, especially Kieran Reid. Like, I think he's possibly one of the greatest captains to ever be in sport. Kieran was just so caring towards his teammates, and he was such a natural born leader. Like, he'd give the boys a kick up the backside when they weren't playing well, and he always made the team his number 1 priority. And besides that, Kieran had just such a good offloading game. He was a massive tackler, probably one of the hardest of all time. He scored over 20 tries for the All Blacks, and obviously he played more than 100 tests and captained the All Blacks 50 times. Across that decade, he first became captain in 2012 and took over the role full-time in 2016. after McCaw retired. Toby Faletau and CJ Stander are always going to be remembered by their national teams for being massive carriers as well, but at the end of the day, I think Kieran Reid is the pick for the number 8 jersey. Number 9, you can't really disagree with Conor Murray, because although Aaron Smith is probably the second to best 9 in the world right now after Anton Dupont, Aaron wasn't too good from 2016 to 2019. His box kicking kind of got a bit stale. His quick ball pace to the game kind of almost felt a wee bit predictable by the 2019 World Cup, whereas Conor Murray's analysis of the field was always excellent, and he was pretty much peerless in just the basics of his role of a halfback. He was a sniper at the breakdown. He'd pick and go himself sometimes. He had an apex kicking game. His passing was just as solid as Aaron Smith's. But most importantly, I think Conor Murray didn't boss his forwards around as much as Aaron Smith does. We all know that Aaron Smith and Conor Murray are both pretty chatty and they like to wind up the opposition, but I think at the end of the day, Conor Murray probably keeps that toned down a wee little bit, just in all honesty. So I'm going to have to agree with World Rugby's pick with Conor Murray at 9. Sorry to all the Highlanders fans, I know some are probably watching this. Number 10's Dan Carter, we all knew that was going to happen. There's no disagreements about that. Although Owen Farrell did push Carter very hard. So I'm going to move on from Carter because obviously he's the 10. I'm now going to skip the number 11 jersey and talk about the centre pairing, which World Rugby have decided to put Ma'a Nonu and Brian O'Driscoll in at the 12 and 13 jerseys. We all know that Brian O'Driscoll is the greatest rugby player to ever play the game and was a massive legend in Irish rugby. His skills were pretty much unparalleled in his day, but I don't feel O'Driscoll played enough of the decade, to be honest, to kind of put himself in contention, because he did retire at the end of 2014 Six Nations, I believe. Whereas Owen Farrell is probably the greatest English player of all time, but actually played all of his rugby until this stage. Across that decade, he debuted, I think, at 19 in 2012. Maybe he was 20, but he was still very young, and within that time period, he scored over 800 points for England, which is monumental. And the guy learned from his mistakes in 2015 to captain England to the 2019 World Cup final. I know there's going to be a couple haters talking about his tackle technique, but apart from the odd bluff here and there, I actually think his tackle technique's one of the best in the world. And his kicking game is second to none after Johnny Wilkinson and Dan Carter. So Nonu, I'm going to move to 13 to accommodate for Owen Farrell. And I'm going to have to take O'Driscoll out of the team just because I don't feel he played enough throughout this decade. So we've got a 10-12 kind of axis, which allows me to pick more of a ball-running fullback, which is higher under the ball. Anyway, to the outside backs, World Rugby has Brian Habana, and you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say no, Julian Savia was robbed. Everyone knew I was going to say it, because Julian is the greatest rugby player of all time, and anyone who disagrees with me needs to stop watching the video and take a hard look at themselves. I'm joking, it's fine, guys. 14 is George North. I agree with that one. I think George North is fantastic, and perhaps even the Welsh version of Julian Savia, I might add. The guy's line breaking, his footwork, just outstanding. The guy scores so many tries. Oh man, I could go on about George North for hours, but I'm just going to cut myself short here because I think my camera battery might be running a bit low. Anyway, for the 15 jersey, World Rugby has picked Ben Smith, but I think Israel Folau probably outperformed Smith under the high ball. He scored his amount of tries in less time, and Folau was a bit more influential in his national side, I believe. I'm kind of suspecting World Rugby left Folau off because of the things that happen in his personal life, but when you ignore the kind of disrespectful comments Folau made on Twitter, in Instagram, and you just forget about all the stuff that's off the field, and you concentrate on what he's doing for the team. You have a hard look and you say, actually, he's doing so much good for his team, and he's probably one of the greatest fullbacks to ever play the game. I don't think there's ever been anybody better under the high ball than Folau. And yes, Ben Smith scored more tries, but I think Folau is probably more consistent in the 15 jersey across the decade. Liam Williams is another good one, so is Rob Kearney, but I'm going to have to say Israel Folau for the 15 jersey. So guys, that's my opinion on World Rugby's Team of the Decade. I agreed with quite a few selections, but I also disagreed with maybe the other 40% of them. So make sure to drop a like down in the buttons down there. Give us a comment as well. Follow us on Instagram. Go off and join us on Patreon as well. And obviously, subscribe to us. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.